So then Harry says he's over there scrambling for security. He said he spoke to consultants, gathered estimates. He filled a notebook with research. The palace had directed him to a firm, which quoted him a price. $6 million a year. They say that's what it's going to cost for security. But $6 million a year seems like a really steep price. I don't know. Who even knows? I'm not living the lifestyle in which I've had to employ security. Anyway, he says he slowly hung up after that startling realization. And then, in the midst of all of his already currently bad news, he gets a terrible report that his old friend, Caroline Flacks, do we remember her from way back when he was still dating around? And he met this girl named Caroline Flacks. It was after Chelsea. And it's kind of a nothing relationship. I mean, it doesn't really sound like it was anything. It's odd that he brought it up in the book. And when I read that, I hadn't actually realized that she'd come to a terrible end, which we are about to discuss right now. And I thought, like, that's so weird that he's bringing her up like this. I mean, who is she? I just chalked it up as like yet one more weirdo story that has no meaning, no beginning, middle, or end. It's just a little, something to say because there's nothing else to say. Although in the comments then later, people were like, Caroline Flacks, it's interesting he should bring her up. Okay, so apparently, what had happened was she had taken her own life. And he says that she just couldn't stand it anymore, apparently. The relentless abuse at the hands of the press year after year had finally broken her. And I felt awful for her family, he says. He says he remembered how they all suffered for her mortal sin of going out with him. And she'd been so light and funny that night they met, the definition of carefree, really. He says it would have been impossible then to imagine the current outcome. Okay, but I'm struggling with what he is trying to conflate here. Is he trying to say that after going out with him, she was never able to regain her footing, that the press had beaten her into the ground? That was years ago. They were a flash in the pan. I'm pretty sure he's not so important that Caroline Flacks was never able to get back up on her feet. If she had personal problems, I can assure you those were her own demons. It was nothing because her life had brushed up against him, and then ever after, her happiness had been poisoned. It's just so self-aggrandizing that after all this time, he's trying to say the press was still focusing on her because of him? Because she wasn't exactly a nobody, I don't know very much about her, but I think that she had already, some fame of her own before she met him. She wasn't on his level, but if there was a press problem, it wasn't one that he had introduced into her life. But then he goes on. I mean, of course, it can't just be like, let me remember an old friend and just remember her. Now he's got to bring it all. He's got to bring himself into it because he's just so self-involved. He says, I told myself as an important reminder. I wasn't being overdramatic. I wasn't warning about things that could never happen. What Meg and I were dealing with was indeed a question of life and death. But is it though? Because think about all the famous people in the world and how very few of them are murdered by the press. And if they end their own lives, in most situations, I don't think you can say, oh, it was the press that did that. Usually it's another thing. But anyway, according to him, the press can drive you to an early grave.